Did you know that right now, while you're watching this video, more than 16 million Brazilians are living with type 2 diabetes? And the most alarming part, almost half of these people don't even know they have the disease. Imagine waking up every day feeling an unexplained tiredness, a thirst that never goes away, and brushing off these signs thinking it's just stress or aging. Meanwhile, silently, your organs are being damaged. Type 2 diabetes doesn't arrive overnight with blaring sirens. It settles in gradually, disguised as symptoms you attribute to a hectic routine, exhausting work, or simply natural aging. But here's the truth: few people tell you. In many cases, this disease is reversible, and even when it isn't, it can be perfectly controlled once you truly understand what's happening inside your body. If you're here, you've probably already asked yourself at some point, could I have diabetes? Or maybe you know someone close who fights this condition every day. Perhaps you have a family history and you're afraid of being next. Whatever brought you here, I want you to know one thing: correct information is your greatest weapon in this battle. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to share with you everything I've learned over decades working with patients who completely transform their lives by deeply understanding type 2 diabetes. I won't overload you with complicated medical terms or make you feel guilty. We're going to talk clearly, directly, and above all, practically. You'll discover the signals your body is desperately trying to send you. Understand why diabetes is not just about eating too much sugar. That's a myth that needs to be debunked. And most importantly, you'll learn real, proven strategies you can start applying today to prevent, control, or even reverse this condition. Before we continue, if this content is making sense to you, please leave a like on this video. It helps more people find this vital information. And if you want to receive more content about preventive health and well-being, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any video. Your health and your family's health will thank you. So let's get straight to the point. What really is type 2 diabetes, and why has it become a silent epidemic affecting younger and younger people? Let's start with the basics, but in a way that actually makes sense to you. Imagine your body as a house with many doors. Glucose, the sugar that comes from the food you eat, is like a visitor that needs to enter those doors to provide energy to every room: your muscles, your brain, your organs. Insulin is the key that opens those doors. In type 2 diabetes, something fascinating and at the same time worrying happens. Your cells start ignoring insulin. It's as if the door lock has rusted and the key no longer works properly. Doctors call this insulin resistance. The pancreas, the organ responsible for producing insulin, notices that the doors aren't opening and does what? It produces more keys, more insulin, trying to force entry. In the beginning, it works. You have elevated insulin levels in the blood, but glucose still manages to enter the cells. You feel nothing wrong. Your tests may even come back normal. That's exactly why we call it a silent epidemic. The disease develops without obvious symptoms, sometimes for years. But here's the problem. The pancreas wasn't designed to work at that frantic pace forever. Over time, it gets tired. Insulin production decreases. Now you have a double scenario: cells that don't respond well to insulin, and a pancreas that can no longer produce enough insulin. Glucose stays trapped in the bloodstream, and that's when the serious problems begin. Now you're probably wondering, why is this happening to so many people? The numbers are frightening. The World Health Organization estimates that the number of people with diabetes has quadrupled since 1980. In Brazil, we're talking about one person being diagnosed with diabetes every 7 seconds. Children and teenagers, who rarely had type 2 diabetes before, now represent a growing share of new cases. The answer lies in the perfect storm we've created with modern lifestyle. Our ancestors walked kilometers every day looking for food. They ate natural, unprocessed foods. They didn't have 2-liter sodas or colorful packages of industrial cookies. Their stress was acute, running from a predator, not chronic like ours, coming from bills, traffic, work pressure. Today we spend hours sitting in front of screens. We have unlimited access to ultra-processed foods loaded with sugars, bad fats, and chemicals our bodies barely recognize as food. We sleep less, stress more, and move less and less. Our bodies simply did not evolve to handle this reality. And there's another factor few people talk about. Type 2 diabetes has a strong genetic component. If your parents or siblings have diabetes, your risk increases significantly. But, and this is crucial, genetics is not destiny. You can have the genetic predisposition and never develop the disease if you make the right choices. Conversely, even without family history, you can develop diabetes if your lifestyle creates the perfect conditions for it. The epidemic is silent for another reason too: shame and stigma. Many people associate diabetes with lack of control or laziness, which is completely unfair and scientifically incorrect. This makes people avoid talking about their symptoms, delay medical visits, or ignore signs because they fear judgment. Meanwhile, the disease keeps advancing. What makes all of this even more urgent is that type 2 diabetes rarely comes alone. It's usually part of what we call metabolic syndrome, a combination of high blood pressure, elevated cholesterol, excess abdominal fat, and of course, elevated glucose. When these factors come together, your risk of heart disease, stroke, and other complications skyrockets. But here's the good news you need to engrave in your mind. Unlike type 1 diabetes, which is autoimmune and requires insulin from diagnosis, type 2 diabetes responds incredibly well to lifestyle changes. We're talking about people who completely reversed their diabetic markers, came off medications, and regained their quality of life. And it all starts with knowledge. Chapter 2. The warning signs your body is sending that you may be ignoring. Your body is incredibly intelligent. It doesn't wait until things get really bad before warning you something is wrong. The problem is that many of these warnings are subtle, easily confused with everyday tiredness, stress, or simply getting older. But when you learn to recognize these signs, you can act before diabetes fully installs itself or causes irreversible damage. Let's start with the most common and most ignored sign: excessive thirst. I'm not talking about normal thirst after eating something salty or exercising. I'm talking about a thirst that never goes away, even after drinking water. You drink 1 glass, 2, 3, and half an hour later, you're thirsty again. Why? When glucose is high in your blood, your kidneys go into emergency mode trying to expel the excess through urine. To do that, they need water, a lot of water. So they pull water from the rest of your body, leaving you dehydrated and constantly thirsty. And that leads directly to the second sign: frequent urination, especially at night. If you're waking up 2, 3, 4 times a night to go to the bathroom, pay attention. Of course, it could be prostate issues in men or urinary tract infections in women, but it can also be your body trying to eliminate excess glucose. Many of my patients say this was the first sign that took them to the doctor, not being able to sleep through the night because of bathroom trips. Now think with me. If your cells aren't getting enough glucose because insulin isn't working properly, what happens? Your cells are starving for energy. And you feel that as a deep, unexplained fatigue. It's not the tiredness of a hard day. It's fatigue that doesn't improve with rest. It's waking up tired even after 8 hours of sleep. It's feeling that simple tasks, like climbing a flight of stairs, leave you exhausted. Excessive hunger walks hand in hand with that fatigue. You just ate, and you're already hungry again. Your body is literally screaming, "I need energy." Because even though you're eating, glucose isn't entering the cells. It's like having a full gas tank, but a car that won't start because the fuel doesn't reach the engine. Here's a sign that scares a lot of people: unexplained weight loss. You didn't change your diet, didn't start exercising more, but the scale keeps showing lower numbers. This happens because, without insulin working properly, your body starts burning muscle and fat to get energy since it can't use the available glucose. If this is happening to you, don't celebrate the weight loss. Investigate immediately. Let's talk about a symptom people rarely associate with diabetes: blurred vision. You try to read a book and the letters look blurry. You look at the TV and the image isn't sharp. This happens because high glucose levels make the lens of your eye swell, changing its focusing ability. Many people rush to the ophthalmologist thinking they need new glasses, when in reality they need to control their blood sugar. Wounds that take forever to heal are another huge red flag. You cut your finger while cooking, and weeks later, it's still there, not fully closed. You scrape your knee, and it becomes a persistent wound. Elevated glucose impairs blood circulation and damages nerves, making healing much slower. This is extremely dangerous, especially on the feet, where small wounds can turn into serious infections. Speaking of feet, here's a symptom that deserves special attention: tingling, numbness, or pain in the hands and feet. It starts as a strange sensation, like pins and needles. Or your feet go numb, as if you wore shoes that were too tight. This is diabetic neuropathy. Excess glucose is literally damaging your nerves. And once the damage occurs, it can be irreversible. Frequent infections are also a major indicator. Women with recurrent vaginal infections, men with repeated urinary infections, anyone with skin infections that appear out of nowhere, this can be diabetes. Elevated glucose creates the perfect environment for bacteria and fungi to multiply. And there's one sign that's less known but extremely important: dark patches on the skin, especially on the neck, armpits, and groin. This is called acanthosis nigricans, and it's a sign of insulin resistance. The skin becomes darker, rough, velvety. Many people think it's dirt and try to scrub it off, but it doesn't go away. If you have this, your body is showing you that insulin isn't working properly. Now here's what you need to understand. You don't need to have all of these symptoms to have diabetes. Some people have only one or two. Others have none until the disease is already advanced. That's why routine exams are so important. They catch the problem before your body has to scream for help. And if you're recognizing these signs in yourself or someone close to you, don't panic, but don't ignore them either. The difference between catching diabetes early and only discovering it years later can be the difference between completely reversing the situation and facing serious complications for the rest of your life. If you're watching this video and thinking, "This sounds like me," leave a comment below saying which symptom caught your attention the most. Sharing experiences helps other people identify themselves and seek help too. Let's clear this up once and for all. Eating sugar does not directly cause diabetes. You can eat sweets every day and never develop diabetes. And there are people who barely consume sugar and still become diabetic. So, if it's not just sugar, what is really behind this disease? The answer is much more complex. And honestly, much more interesting. Type 2 diabetes is the result of a combination of factors that create the perfect metabolic storm. Let's break each one down. First, let's talk about insulin resistance, which is truly the heart of the problem. And do you know one of the biggest causes of insulin resistance? Visceral fat. That's the fat that accumulates around your internal organs, especially in the abdomen. Unlike subcutaneous fat, right under the skin, visceral fat is metabolically active. It releases inflammatory substances that completely disrupt insulin function. You can have a normal BMI and still have excess visceral fat. That's why that protruding belly, even in people who aren't very overweight, is such an important warning sign. Men with waist circumference above 102 cm and women above 88 cm are already in a high-risk zone. Now, what causes that visceral fat buildup? Here come refined and ultra-processed carbohydrates. And no, I'm not talking only about sugar. I'm talking about white bread, white pasta, white rice, cakes, cookies, sugary breakfast cereals, and practically everything that comes in a colourful supermarket package. These foods spike your blood sugar rapidly, force your pancreas to produce huge insulin surges, and that repeated cycle, day after day, year after year, is what creates insulin resistance. But there's more. Sedentary behaviour is as important a factor as, if not more important than, diet. When you move, your muscles consume glucose independently of insulin. It's like exercise opens a back door for glucose to enter cells without needing the insulin key. People who sit for 8, 10, 12 hours a day are literally training their bodies to become insulin resistant. And here's something that will surprise you. Chronic stress is one of the great silent villains of diabetes. When you're stressed, your body releases cortisol and adrenaline, hormones designed for emergency situations. Those hormones raise your blood sugar to give you quick energy to fight or flee. The problem? In modern life, you're not running from a lion. You're stressed about your boss, bills, traffic, and that state is continuous. Result: chronically elevated blood sugar and insulin resistance. Lack of sleep is another devastating factor almost no one takes seriously. Sleeping less than 6 hours per night significantly increases your risk of developing type 2 diabetes. Why? Because sleep deprivation completely disrupts your hunger and satiety hormones, raises cortisol, increases ghrelin, hunger hormone, decreases leptin, satiety hormone, and makes your cells more insulin resistant. Have you noticed how on days you sleep poorly, you feel hungrier and crave carbs and sweets? It's not a coincidence. Let's talk about something very few doctors address properly: low-grade chronic inflammation. Your body is constantly in a mild state of inflammation caused by poor diet, lack of sleep, stress, environmental toxins, and even gut problems. This systemic inflammation directly interferes with insulin signaling. It's like constant interference in a radio signal. The message doesn't come through clearly. Your gut microbiota also plays a surprising role. Trillions of bacteria live in your intestine, and their balance directly affects how you metabolize food and how your cells respond to insulin. Diets rich in ultra-processed foods, excessive antibiotic use, lack of fiber. All of this destroys healthy microbiota and can contribute to insulin resistance. Now, we can't ignore the genetic component. You may have inherited genes that make you more prone to diabetes, but, and this is fundamental, genes are not destiny. They're like loaded guns. Lifestyle pulls the trigger. You can carry those genes your whole life and never develop diabetes if your life choices are appropriate. Age is also a factor, but not in the way you think. It's not aging itself that causes diabetes. It's the accumulation of years of bad habits finally taking their toll. It's the progressive loss of muscle mass that happens when you don't exercise. It's the gradual weight gain, year after year. It's accumulated stress. That's why we're seeing more and more young people developing type 2 diabetes. They're accumulating decades of damage in just a few years due to extremely inadequate lifestyles. And here's something that will make you rethink your choices. Some medications can increase your diabetes risk. Long-term corticosteroids, some antipsychotics, high-dose statins, all can interfere with glucose metabolism. If you take any chronic medication, talk to your doctor about this risk. Finally, conditions like polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS, in women, sleep apnea, fatty liver, and other metabolic conditions are closely linked to the development of type 2 diabetes. They don't cause diabetes by themselves, but they create the perfect environment for insulin resistance to develop. So when we put it all together, ultra-processed diet, sedentary lifestyle, chronic stress, poor sleep, systemic inflammation, imbalanced microbiota, genetic predisposition, visceral fat accumulation, you have the complete recipe for type 2 diabetes. Sugar is just one piece of that giant puzzle. Understanding this completely changes how you approach prevention and treatment. It's not just about eating less sweets. It's about transforming your lifestyle in a comprehensive and sustainable way. Now we come to what I consider the most important part of this video: understanding exactly what is happening inside your body when glucose stays elevated. Because when you can visualize the damage being done, when you truly grasp the microscopic severity of the problem, your daily choices take on a completely different meaning. Imagine glucose as tiny sharp crystals circulating in your bloodstream. When levels are normal, everything works perfectly. But when glucose remains chronically high, these crystals start wreaking havoc everywhere they go. And I'm not exaggerating. Elevated glucose is literally toxic to your body. Let's start with your blood vessels, which are like the highways that carry blood to deliver oxygen and nutrients to every cell. Excess glucose damages the inner lining of these vessels, called the endothelium. Think of it as a smooth asphalt road that begins to develop cracks and potholes. This damage creates inflammation and allows cholesterol and other substances to build up in the vessel walls, forming plaques, what we call atherosclerosis. These plaques narrow your blood vessels and can eventually block them completely. When this happens in the heart, you get a heart attack. When it happens in the brain, you get a stroke. And here's the statistic that should make you pause this video. Adults with diabetes are 2 to 4 times more likely to die from heart disease compared to people without diabetes. 2 to 4 times. Let that sink in. Now let's move to your kidneys. 2 incredible fist-sized organs that filter your blood 24 hours a day, removing waste and excess fluid. Each kidney contains about 1 million tiny filtering units called nephrons. The problem? Elevated glucose damages the tiny blood vessels inside these nephrons. Over time, they start leaking proteins that should stay in the blood, and eventually they lose their ability to filter properly. Diabetic nephropathy, as it's called, progresses silently. By the time you notice symptoms, swelling in the legs, extreme fatigue, nausea, your kidneys have already lost most of their function. And the final destination? Dialysis or kidney transplant. In Brazil, diabetes is the leading cause of chronic kidney failure, responsible for about 30% of all dialysis patients. 30%. People hooked to a machine 3 times a week because glucose destroyed their kidneys. But let's keep traveling through your body. Your eyes are incredibly delicate windows to the world, and excess glucose doesn't spare them either. The retina, the light-sensitive layer at the back of the eye, is full of tiny blood vessels. Elevated glucose damages these vessels, causing them to leak fluid or bleed. Your body tries to repair this by growing new vessels, but those new vessels are fragile and bleed easily, causing scarring. Diabetic retinopathy is the leading cause of blindness in working-age adults. And here's the most frightening part. It causes no symptoms in the early stages. You don't feel pain, your vision may seem normal, but the damage is happening. By the time you notice vision problems, the damage may already be irreversible. That's why every diabetic should have annual eye exams without exception. Now let's talk about your nerves, the electrical communication network of your body. Elevated glucose damages nerves in 2 ways. First, excess glucose directly interferes with the nerve's ability to transmit signals. Second, the blood vessels that nourish those nerves become damaged, depriving them of oxygen and essential nutrients. Peripheral neuropathy usually starts in the feet and legs. You feel tingling, burning, pain, or numbness, but it can progress to the hands as well. The real danger, when you lose sensation in your feet. You step on a nail, develop a blister, cut your foot, and don't even notice. And because circulation is also impaired and the immune system compromised, those wounds don't heal. They get infected. And in severe cases, they lead to amputation. The numbers are devastating. Every 30 seconds, someone in the world loses a lower limb due to diabetes complications. Someone is losing a leg or foot while you watch this video. And in most cases, it could have been prevented with proper blood sugar control. Let's go to your brain now. Recent studies show that poorly controlled type 2 diabetes is associated with accelerated cognitive decline and a significantly increased risk of dementia, including Alzheimer's. Elevated glucose causes brain inflammation, damages cerebral blood vessels, and interferes with the brain's ability to use glucose as energy. Ironically, the brain needs glucose, but too much of it destroys it. Your liver also suffers tremendously. Insulin resistance causes the liver to keep producing glucose even when it's not needed, worsening the problem. In addition, excess circulating insulin stimulates the liver to convert glucose into fat, leading to hepatic steatosis, fatty liver. Over time, this can progress to inflammation, fibrosis, and even cirrhosis. And we can't forget your immune system. Elevated glucose impairs the function of white blood cells, your body's defense cells. They become less efficient at fighting bacteria and viruses. That's why diabetics have more frequent, more severe, and slower to resolve infections. A simple urinary tract infection can turn into sepsis. The flu can progress to severe pneumonia. Now here's something that deeply affects quality of life but is rarely discussed. Diabetes affects your sexual health. In men, damage to blood vessels and nerves can cause erectile dysfunction. Studies show diabetics are 3 times more likely to develop this problem. In women, it can cause vaginal dryness, pain during intercourse, and decreased libido. Even your skin suffers. Elevated glucose reduces skin elasticity, slows healing, increases the risk of fungal and bacterial infections, and can cause specific conditions like diabetic dermopathy and diabetic blisters. And let's talk about what all of this causes emotionally. Poorly controlled diabetes is strongly associated with depression and anxiety. It's not just the stress of living with a chronic disease. It's also the direct effect of blood sugar fluctuations on mood and brain chemistry. People with diabetes are twice as likely to develop depression compared to the general population. But here's what you need to understand above all. None of this happens overnight. These damages are progressive and cumulative. Every day your glucose stays elevated is one more day of additional damage. But the opposite is also true. Every day you keep your glucose under control is one day of protection, one day of healing, one day of prevention. And the science is clear. The better the glycemic control, the lower the risk of all these complications. It's not about being perfect. It's about being consistent. It's about understanding that every choice you make, what you eat, whether you move, how you manage stress, is literally determining the health of every organ in your body. If the previous chapter showed you what happens inside your body, now I'm going to show you how that translates into real life. And I need to be honest with you, this part is hard to hear, but it's necessary, because the difference between knowing these complications and ignoring them can literally be the difference between life and death, between independence and dependence, between quality of life and suffering. Let's start with the most lethal complication, cardiovascular diseases. When we talk about diabetes, we're not just talking about high blood sugar. We're talking about the leading cause of death among diabetics. 7 out of every 10 people with diabetes die from heart disease or stroke. 7 out of 10. It's not a minority, not an exception. It's the rule. Heart attacks in diabetics are particularly treacherous. Many diabetics suffer what we call a silent heart attack. Diabetic neuropathy has damaged the nerves of the heart so much that the person doesn't feel the typical chest pain. They may only feel mild discomfort, nausea, unusual fatigue. And while they think it's indigestion or tiredness, they're actually having a massive heart attack. By the time they seek help, precious time has already been lost. Strokes are even more common in diabetics. A person with diabetes has 1.5 times greater chance of having a stroke than someone without the disease. And the consequences are devastating. Paralysis on one side of the body, loss of speech, loss of memory, complete dependence on caregivers. People who were active and independent suddenly can no longer dress themselves, go to the bathroom alone, or feed themselves. Now let's talk about a complication that keeps many people awake at night. Kidney failure. Imagine having to go to a clinic 3 times a week, being connected to a machine for 4 hours while it filters your blood because your kidneys no longer work. Imagine having to follow an extremely restrictive diet, not being able to drink water freely, feeling exhausted all the time. That's the reality for thousands of Brazilians whose diabetes destroyed their kidneys. And when the kidneys fail completely, your options are limited and difficult. Either you stay on dialysis for the rest of your life, or you join the kidney transplant waiting list, a long, uncertain line where many die waiting. And even if you get a transplant, you'll have to take immunosuppressive drugs for life to prevent rejection. Blindness is another terrifying reality. Imagine waking up one day and no longer being able to see the faces of the people you love. Not being able to read, drive, work, do the most basic tasks on your own. Diabetes is the leading cause of preventable blindness in adults. Preventable. That means these people didn't have to go blind. But due to lack of proper control, lack of regular exams, underestimating the disease, they lost their sight. And it's not just retinopathy. Diabetics also have higher risk of early cataracts, glaucoma, and other eye conditions. Vision deteriorates gradually. First you need stronger glasses, then you have difficulty driving at night. Then you start tripping over objects until one day complete darkness arrives. Let's talk about amputations, because this is something people need to understand in all its gravity. Diabetic foot is one of the most feared complications. It starts with loss of sensation. You no longer feel pain in your feet. Then you develop a small wound, maybe from tight shoes, maybe from stepping on something. You don't notice because it doesn't hurt. The wound doesn't heal because circulation is impaired. It gets infected. The infection spreads to the bone. Gangrene develops. And then there's no choice. Amputation is necessary. First the toes, then the foot, then the leg below the knee, sometimes even above the knee. And the statistics are shocking. After a lower limb amputation, up to 50% of diabetic patients will have to amputate the other limb within 3 to 5 years. Imagine losing a leg. Imagine having to use a prosthesis or a wheelchair. Imagine no longer being able to climb stairs, walk on the beach, play with your grandchildren. And the worst part, knowing it could have been avoided with proper foot care and blood sugar control. Diabetic neuropathy goes beyond the feet. It can affect the digestive system, causing gastroparesis. Your stomach doesn't empty properly, leading to nausea, vomiting, bloating, and frustrating inability to predict how your body will react to food. It can affect the bladder, causing urinary incontinence or urinary retention, forcing the use of diapers or catheters. It can affect the autonomic cardiovascular system, causing orthostatic hypotension. You stand up and faint because your body can no longer regulate blood pressure properly. It can affect the ability to feel hypoglycemia, a condition called hypoglycemia unawareness, where your blood sugar drops dangerously low without warning symptoms, which can lead to seizures, coma, or death. Let's talk about infections. Diabetics have more frequent, more severe, and harder to treat infections. A simple urinary tract infection can quickly progress to kidney infection and sepsis. Pneumonia can be fatal. Skin infections can turn into deep abscesses or necrotizing fasciitis, a condition that rapidly destroys tissue and has high mortality. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw this dramatically. Diabetics had a much higher risk of hospitalization, need for mechanical ventilation, and death. Diabetes turned a viral infection into a potentially fatal sentence, and there are complications that deeply affect quality of life, but are less talked about. Sexual dysfunction in both men and women can destroy relationships and self-esteem. Depression and anxiety associated with diabetes can be disabling. Chronic fatigue prevents you from working properly, taking care of your family, enjoying life. Diabetes complications also affect cognition. Studies show decline in memory, processing speed, executive function. People report brain fog, difficulty concentrating, frequent forgetfulness, and the risk of dementia increases significantly. Diabetics have 60% higher chance of developing Alzheimer's. Now, before you think I'm only painting a picture of despair, let me tell you the most important part. All of these complications are avoidable, or their progression can be dramatically slowed. All of them. The DCCT, Diabetes Control and Complications Trial, one of the largest studies on diabetes ever conducted, showed that keeping HbA1c below 7% reduces risk of retinopathy by 76%, risk of nephropathy by 50%, risk of neuropathy by 60%. Every percentage point you lower your HbA1c decreases your risk of microvascular complications by 37%. Every point. That means small, consistent improvements make a gigantic long-term difference. The people who develop these devastating complications are not the ones who tried and failed. They are the ones who didn't try, who underestimated the disease, who thought a little high doesn't hurt, who skipped appointments, who didn't check their blood sugar, who didn't change their lifestyle. The message here is not paralyzing fear. It's motivating urgency. It's a call to action. Because you have the power to choose a different path. You have the power to protect your eyes, your kidneys, your heart, your nerves, your limbs. But that power only exists if you act now. Not tomorrow, not after the holidays, not next year. Now. Now that you understand the gravity of the complications, the most important question probably hammering in your head is, and me, am I at risk? The good news is that type 2 diabetes doesn't appear out of nowhere. It leaves clues, warning signs, clear risk factors that can be identified years before a diagnosis. And the earlier you identify your risk, the greater your chances of completely preventing the disease. Let's start with the most obvious and most dangerous risk factor, excess weight, especially abdominal fat. If you look in the mirror and see a protruding belly, even if the rest of your body looks normal, pay close attention. Grab a measuring tape right now. Measure your waist circumference at the level of your navel. Men above 102 centimeters and women above 88 centimeters are already in a high-risk zone for insulin resistance. But it's not just how much you weigh, it's where that fat is located. You can have two people with the same weight, same height, same BMI, but completely different risks. The person with fat concentrated in the abdomen, apple shape, has much higher risk than the one with fat on the hips and thighs, pear shape. Why? Because visceral fat, the fat that surrounds your internal organs, is metabolically active and produces inflammatory substances that destroy insulin sensitivity. Now, family history is one of the strongest predictors. If your father, mother, or siblings have type 2 diabetes, your risk increases 2 to 6 times. If both parents have diabetes, your chances reach 50%. This doesn't mean you will inevitably get diabetes, but it does mean you need to be much more vigilant and proactive with your lifestyle choices. Age is another important factor, but not in the way you imagine. Traditionally, we considered type 2 diabetes a disease of adults over 45, but that has changed dramatically. Today we see teenagers and young adults in their 20s and 30s being diagnosed. Why? Because the other risk factors, obesity, sedentary lifestyle, poor diet, are accelerating the process. So yes, if you're over 45, get regular screenings. But if you're younger and have other risk factors, don't feel safe just because of your age. Let's talk about ethnicity, because this is a real and important risk factor. People of African, Hispanic, Asian, and indigenous descent have a greater genetic predisposition to develop type 2 diabetes. This isn't prejudice, it's biology. These populations develop insulin resistance more easily and at younger ages. If you belong to one of these ethnic groups, you need to start screening earlier and be even more rigorous with prevention. Sedentary lifestyle is such a powerful risk factor that it cannot be ignored. If you spend most of your day sitting, at the office, in traffic, in front of the TV, and don't engage in regular physical activity, your risk skyrockets. And when I say regular physical activity, I'm not talking about becoming an athlete. I'm talking about 150 minutes per week of moderate activity. This can be brisk walking, dancing, swimming, cycling. Physically active people reduce their risk of type 2 diabetes by about 30 to 50%. Now pay attention to a risk factor many people don't know about: gestational diabetes. Women who had diabetes during pregnancy have a 50% risk of developing type 2 diabetes in the 10 years following delivery. 50%! And it's not just the mother. Babies born weighing more than 4 kilograms also have a higher risk of developing diabetes later in life. If you had gestational diabetes or gave birth to a large baby, regular follow-up is essential. Polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS, is another significant risk factor. Women with PCOS have insulin resistance as a central feature of the condition, and up to 70% of them will develop prediabetes or diabetes over their lifetime. If you have irregular cycles, excessive hair growth, persistent acne, and difficulty losing weight, talk to your doctor about PCOS and diabetes screening. High blood pressure is both a risk factor and a frequent companion of diabetes. If your blood pressure is above 140/90 mmHg, you are more likely to have insulin resistance, and that makes sense. Both conditions share common causes: obesity, inflammation, Poor diet, sedentary lifestyle, altered cholesterol and triglycerides are also warning signs. If your HDL, good cholesterol, is below 35 mg/dl, or your triglycerides are above 250 mg/dl, you may already be developing insulin resistance even if your blood glucose is still normal. Now let's talk about the tests that actually diagnose diabetes and pre-diabetes. Because symptoms are not reliable, you can have diabetes without feeling absolutely anything. The three main tests are fasting blood glucose. You fast for 8 to 12 hours and have blood drawn. Normal is below 100 mg/dl. Between 100 and 125 mg/dl is pre-diabetes. Above 126 mg/dl on 2 separate occasions is diabetes. Oral glucose tolerance test. You have blood drawn fasting, drink a solution with 75 grams of glucose, and have blood drawn again after 2 hours. Normal is below 140 mg/dl. Between 140 and 199 mg/dl is pre-diabetes. Above 200 mg/dl is diabetes. This test is more sensitive and can detect problems that fasting glucose misses. HbA1c, glycated hemoglobin. This is the most important test because it shows your average blood glucose over the last 2 to 3 months. Normal is below 5.7%. Between 5.7% and 6.4% is pre-diabetes. Above 6.5% is diabetes. This test doesn't require fasting and is less affected by momentary variations. Here's something crucial. Many people get a normal fasting glucose result and leave the doctor's office relieved, not knowing they may have pre-diabetes or even diabetes that would only be detected by HbA1c or the tolerance test. Don't accept just one type of test. Ask for the full profile. And there's more. Prediabetes is not a benign condition. It's not a harmless, almost diabetes. Studies show that up to 70% of people with prediabetes will develop type 2 diabetes if they don't change their lifestyle. And even in the prediabetes phase, damage to blood vessels and nerves is already beginning. But here's the most hopeful part. Prediabetes is completely reversible. With lifestyle changes, proper nutrition, regular exercise, modest weight loss, you can normalize your blood sugar and completely avoid progression to diabetes. The Diabetes Prevention Program, DPP study, showed that lifestyle changes reduce the risk of progression from prediabetes to diabetes by 58%. 58%. So how often should you get these tests? If you're 45 or older, get screened every 3 years if results are normal, annually if you have prediabetes. If you're under 45 but overweight and have at least one other risk factor, start screening now and repeat as directed by your doctor. And don't ignore subtle signs. If you're gaining weight for no apparent reason, if you're more tired than you should be, if you have excessive thirst or frequent infections, don't wait for routine exams. Seek evaluation immediately. The message here is clear. Knowledge is power. Knowing your numbers, your blood glucose, your HbA1c, your waist circumference, your weight, gives you the power to act before it's too late. Ignorance is not protection, it's multiplied risk. Now we reach the part that can truly transform your life. Everything we've talked about so far, the symptoms, the causes, the complications, the risks, would just be scary information if I didn't show you exactly what you can do to prevent or reverse type 2 diabetes. And here's the most liberating truth you'll hear today. You have far more control over this than you imagine. I'm not talking about magic solutions, fad diets that promise results in 7 days, or miracle supplements. I'm talking about scientifically proven strategies, tested on thousands of real people, that produced measurable and lasting results. And the best part, you don't have to do everything perfectly. Small, consistent changes produce extraordinary results. Let's start with the most powerful and most underestimated strategy, modest weight loss. And when I say modest, I mean exactly that. You don't need to lose 30, 40, or 50 kilos. Studies show that losing just 5 to 7% of your body weight already dramatically reduces your risk of developing type 2 diabetes. If you weigh 90 kilo, we're talking about 4.5 to 6.3 kilo. That's completely achievable and sustainable. The DPP study I mentioned earlier followed more than 3,000 people with prediabetes. The group that lost an average of 5.6 kilograms and exercised 150 minutes per week reduced their risk of developing diabetes by 58%. And notice, these people didn't become athletes or follow extreme diets. They made modest, consistent changes. But how do you lose that weight in a healthy and sustainable way? It's not about cutting carbs completely or fasting for 24 hours. It's about changing the quality of what you eat. And here is the fundamental principle: real food instead of ultra-processed products. Let's get practical. Your plate should be mainly composed of vegetables. The more colorful, the better. Broccoli, cauliflower, spinach, tomatoes, bell peppers, carrots, zucchini. These foods are rich in fiber, vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients that fight inflammation and improve insulin sensitivity. And the best part, you can eat them freely without worrying about calories. Lean proteins are essential. Skinless chicken, fish, eggs, legumes such as beans and lentils, tofu. Proteins keep you full longer, preserve muscle mass during weight loss, and have minimal impact on blood sugar. Try to include a source of protein in every meal. Now, carbohydrates, the most controversial topic. You don't need to eliminate carbs. You need to choose the right ones. Swap white rice for brown rice or quinoa. Swap white bread for real whole grain bread, the kind with visible grains, not just brown-dyed white bread. Include sweet potatoes, yams, cassava. These complex carbohydrates release glucose slowly, don't cause glycemic spikes, and are rich in fiber. Good fats are not your enemies, they're your allies. Avocado, extra virgin olive oil, nuts, almonds, walnuts, chia seeds, flax seeds, fatty fish like salmon and sardines. These fats improve satiety, reduce inflammation, and help absorb vitamins. But there is one category of foods you need to eliminate or drastically reduce: ultra-processed foods, sodas, boxed juices, industrial cakes, filled cookies, packaged snacks, frozen ready meals, processed meats, fast food. These products are metabolic bombs, loaded with sugar, trans fats, sodium, and chemical additives that destroy your insulin sensitivity. Here's a simple rule that works. If it comes in a colorful package and has more than 5 ingredients, most of which you can't pronounce, leave it on the shelf. If your grandmother wouldn't recognize it as food, it's not real food. Now let's move to the second most important strategy: physical exercise. And before you think, I don't have time or I don't like the gym, let me show you how this can be simpler than you imagine. The goal is 150 minutes of moderate activity per week. That's 30 minutes, 5 times a week. And moderate activity means anything that leaves you a little breathless, but still able to hold a conversation. Brisk walking, dancing, swimming, cycling, vigorous gardening, climbing stairs. But here's the secret no one tells you. Any movement is better than no movement. If you're starting from complete sedentary behavior, begin with 10 minutes a day, then go to 15, then 20. The important thing is to build the habit, not perfection. And there's more. Resistance exercise, weight training, body weight exercises, resistance bands is incredibly powerful for preventing diabetes. Why? Because muscle is the main organ that consumes glucose. The more muscle mass you have, the better your body processes sugar. 2 to 3 strength training sessions per week make a monumental difference. A simple strategy: break up long periods of sitting. If you work sitting down, stand up every 30 minutes. Take a 2-minute walk, stretch, go up and down stairs. These small movement breaks throughout the day dramatically improve your insulin sensitivity. Let's talk about something very few doctors address properly: sleep. Sleeping less than 6 hours per night, or more than 9 hours, is associated with a significant increase in diabetes risk. Inadequate sleep completely disrupts your hunger and satiety hormones, raises cortisol, reduces insulin sensitivity, and makes you crave carbs and sweets. Prioritize 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep. Create a routine. Go to bed at the same time. Keep the room dark and cool. Avoid screens at least 1 hour before bed. Avoid caffeine after 2 p.m. Treat sleep with the same seriousness you treat diet and exercise. Stress management is another critical strategy. Chronic stress raises cortisol, which raises blood sugar and promotes abdominal fat accumulation. Find techniques that work for you. Meditation, deep breathing, yoga, nature walks, relaxing hobbies, quality time with loved ones. Even just 10 minutes of diaphragmatic breathing per day can significantly reduce your cortisol levels. Inhale through your nose counting to 4, hold for 4, exhale through your mouth counting to 6. Repeat for 10 minutes. Simple, free, and scientifically proven. Adequate hydration is more important than most people imagine. Drink water throughout the day. Not soda, not juice, pure water. Chronic dehydration can affect how your body processes glucose. A good goal, 30 to 35 milliliters per kilo of body weight. If you weigh 70 kilo, that's about 2.1 to 2.4 liters per day. Limit or eliminate alcohol. Alcohol interferes with glucose metabolism, promotes weight gain, especially abdominal, impairs sleep, and reduces your ability to make healthy decisions. How many times have you eaten junk after drinking? If you drink, keep it to a maximum of 1 drink per day for women, 2 for men. But honestly, less is always better. Now, a strategy few people implement, but that makes a huge difference. Monitor yourself. Measure your waist circumference monthly. Weigh yourself weekly. Get regular blood tests. Keep a food diary for at least 1 week to understand what you're really eating. What gets measured gets managed. And here's something that may seem simple, but is profoundly powerful. Eat slowly and mindfully. Chew well, savor your food, eat without distractions, no TV, no phone. It takes 20 minutes for your brain to register satiety. When you eat fast, you overeat before realizing you're full. Include abundant fiber. The goal is at least 25 to 30 grams of fiber per day. Fiber slows glucose absorption, feeds beneficial gut bacteria, improves satiety, reduces cholesterol. Sources: vegetables, fruits with skin, whole grains, legumes, seeds. And finally, but no less important, build a support system. Share your goals with family and friends. Find a walking partner. Join support groups. People with social support have much more success maintaining lifestyle changes long term. Remember, you don't need to do everything perfectly from day one. Choose 1 or 2 changes to start. Master them, then add more. Progress, not perfection. Consistency, not intensity. That's the formula that works in real life. Here is the final continuation and completion of the full English translation of the script. Chapter 8. What to do if you already have type 2 diabetes or prediabetes. If you've already been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, or if you're in the prediabetes stage, I want you to understand something fundamental before we go any further. A diabetes diagnosis is not a life sentence. It is not an unchangeable fate. It is a turning point, an urgent call to action. And with the right strategies, you can not only control diabetes, in many cases, you can completely reverse it. Yes, you heard that correctly. Reversal. Recent studies, including the impressive direct study published in The Lancet, showed that nearly half of people with type 2 diabetes who lost significant weight, on average 10-15 kilos, achieved complete remission, normal blood sugar without medications. Half. This is not an empty promise. It is proven science. But let's be realistic. Not everyone will achieve full reversal. And that's okay, because even if you don't reach total remission, rigorous blood sugar control prevents all those devastating complications we talked about. You can live a long, healthy, and fulfilling life with diabetes, as long as you do your part. So let's talk about the complete arsenal of tools available to you. Medications, strategic nutrition, targeted exercise, and smart monitoring. Medications and their role. Let's start with medications, because there is a lot of fear and resistance surrounding them. Some people see medication as personal failure, as if needing medicine means you didn't try hard enough. That is completely wrong and dangerous. Medications for diabetes are tools. Just as you wouldn't feel bad about wearing glasses to see better, you shouldn't feel bad about using medication to control your blood sugar. The goal is to protect your body from the damage caused by elevated glucose, and if medication is necessary for that, then it is welcome. Metformin is usually the first medication prescribed, and for good reasons. It reduces glucose production by the liver, improves insulin sensitivity, has an excellent safety profile, and can even help a little with weight loss. Billions of people have used it safely for decades. The most common side effects, gastrointestinal discomfort, diarrhea, usually improve over time or with the extended release version. There are also newer classes of medications that are truly revolutionary. SGLT2 inhibitors make your kidneys eliminate glucose through urine, lowering blood sugar. And studies show they also protect the heart and kidneys, reducing the risk of heart failure and slowing the progression of kidney disease. GLP-1 receptor agonists, such as semaglutide and liraglutide, mimic a natural hormone that stimulates insulin production, reduces appetite, and slows gastric emptying. Many people lose significant weight with these medications, which in itself improves glycemic control. And like SGLT2 inhibitors, they have proven cardiovascular benefits. For some people, especially those diagnosed many years ago or with very high blood sugars, insulin may be necessary. And again, this is not failure. Insulin is the hormone your body should be producing adequately. Supplying it externally when needed is simply giving your body what it requires. But here is the crucial point. Medication does not replace a healthy lifestyle. It complements it. You cannot take your medication and then eat whatever you want, ignore exercise, and expect good results. The best outcomes always come from the combination of medication, when necessary, with consistent lifestyle changes. Strategic nutrition for people with diabetes. Now let's dive into nutrition specifically for those who already have diabetes. This goes beyond general prevention recommendations. Here, every food choice has a direct and measurable impact on your blood sugar. The most important concept you need to understand is glycemic index and glycemic load. Glycemic index measures how quickly a food raises your blood sugar. High glycemic index foods, white bread, potatoes, white rice, sodas, spike your glucose rapidly. Low glycemic index foods, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, release glucose slowly. But glycemic load is even more useful because it also takes into account the amount of carbohydrate in the portion. For example, watermelon has a high glycemic index, but because most of it is water, the glycemic load of a normal portion is low. Prioritize low glycemic load foods. Non-starchy vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, spinach, bell peppers. Legumes, beans, lentils, chickpeas. Moderate portions of whole grains, fruits with skin and lower sugar content, berries, apples, pears. The order in which you eat also matters. Studies show that eating vegetables and protein before carbohydrates significantly reduces the post-meal glycemic peak. So structure your plate. Start with the salad, then the protein, and leave the rice or potato for last. Portion control is essential. Even healthy foods raise blood sugar if eaten in excess. Use the plate method. Half the plate with non-starchy vegetables, 1/4 with lean protein, 1/4 with complex carbohydrate. Spread your meals throughout the day. 3 main meals and 1 or 2 small healthy snacks keep your blood sugar more stable than skipping meals, and then eating large amounts at once. Always combine carbohydrates with protein or healthy fat. This slows glucose absorption. If you're going to eat fruit, eat it with a handful of nuts. If you're going to eat whole grain bread, add natural peanut butter or cottage cheese. And here is a powerful technique few people know. Cooling starches. When you cook potatoes, rice, or pasta, and then cool them in the refrigerator, resistant starch forms, which is not fully digested. This reduces the glycemic impact. So that cold potato salad or sushi with chilled rice has less effect on blood sugar than the hot versions. Targeted exercise for glycemic control. Exercise for diabetics is not just about losing weight. It is a direct tool for glycemic control. When your muscles contract during exercise, they consume glucose independently of insulin. It's like a back door that always works, no matter how resistant your cells are. Aerobic exercise, walking, running, cycling, swimming, improves insulin sensitivity for up to 72 hours after the session. That means a 30-minute walk today protects you for the next 3 days. But resistance training is equally crucial. Muscle mass is your greatest ally in controlling diabetes. The more muscle you have, the more storage you have for glucose. 2 to 3 strength training sessions per week make a monumental difference. Here is a simple and incredibly effective strategy. Walk after meals. Just 10 to 15 minutes of light walking after lunch and dinner can reduce the post-meal glycemic peak by up to 30%. This is one of the most powerful and easiest interventions you can implement. Monitoring. Knowledge is control. You cannot control what you do not measure. Blood glucose monitoring is your real-time feedback tool. There are several approaches. Traditional glucometers require finger pricks several times a day. It's uncomfortable, but provides valuable information. The ideal frequency depends on your type of treatment. People on insulin need to monitor more often. Continuous glucose monitors, CGM, are revolutionary devices that measure your glucose constantly throughout the day through a small sensor on the arm or abdomen. They show trends, alert for hypo or hyperglycemia, and eliminate the need for constant pricks. If you have access, seriously consider it. But beyond daily measurements, the most important test is HbA1c, which should be done every 3 months. It shows your average blood glucose over the last 2 to 3 months. The goal for most diabetics is to keep it below 7%, but your doctor can individualize this target. Use monitoring strategically. Test before and 2 hours after meals to understand how different foods affect you. Everyone is different. What spikes one person's glucose may have little effect on another. The path to reversion. Now, for those who want to pursue complete remission, here is what science shows. Substantial weight loss is the key. In the direct study, participants who lost 15 kilos or more had an 86% chance of remission. But it's not just any weight loss. It is specifically the loss of fat from the pancreas and liver that restores normal function to these organs. Very low-calorie diets, 800 to 900 calories per day for 8 to 12 weeks, followed by gradual reintroduction of healthy foods and weight maintenance, have shown impressive results. But attention! These extremely restrictive diets should only be done under strict medical supervision. It is not something to do on your own. The good news? You don't need to lose 15 kilo to see huge benefits. Every kilo lost improves your glycemic control. Every healthy meal matters. Every exercise session counts. And remember, even if you don't achieve full remission, keeping your HbA1c below 7%, your blood pressure controlled, your cholesterol at appropriate levels, this protects you from complications. You can live a full, active, and healthy life. The psychological factor. Finally, do not underestimate the emotional and psychological aspect of living with diabetes. It is normal to feel overwhelmed at times. It is normal to have difficult days. Seek support from mental health professionals if necessary. Connect with other people living with diabetes. Celebrate your victories, forgive your slip-ups, and keep moving forward. You are not alone on this journey, and you are stronger and more capable than you imagine. We have reached the end of this journey of knowledge, but for you, this is only the beginning. If you watched until here, it is because type 2 diabetes has touched your life in some way. Whether because you were diagnosed, because someone you love is fighting it, or because you recognize the warning signs in yourself. And if you made it this far, you have already taken the most important step. You sought knowledge. Let's quickly recap what you need to engrave in your mind from now on. First, type 2 diabetes is a silent epidemic affecting millions of people, many without even knowing. It doesn't appear overnight, but develops gradually through insulin resistance, caused by a lifestyle our bodies were not designed to handle. Second, the signs are there: excessive thirst, frequent urination, unexplained tiredness, blurred vision, slow healing wounds, tingling in the feet. If you have these symptoms, don't ignore them. Your body is asking for help. Third, the causes go far beyond sugar. We are talking about visceral fat, sedentary lifestyle, chronic stress, poor sleep, systemic inflammation, ultra-processed diet. It is a combination of factors that creates the perfect storm. Fourth, when glucose gets out of control, it silently damages every organ: heart, kidneys, eyes, nerves, brain. The complications are real, they are devastating, but they are avoidable. Fifth, you can be at risk even without symptoms. Family history, excess weight, sedentary lifestyle, age over 45, ethnicity, high blood pressure. These factors dramatically increase your chances. Get tested, know your numbers. Sixth, prevention works. Losing just 5 to 7% of your weight, exercising 150 minutes per week, eating real food, sleeping well, managing stress. These changes can reduce your risk by up to 58%. Seventh, if you already have diabetes, there is hope. With significant weight loss, strategic nutrition, targeted exercise, and medication when necessary, you can not only control, you can reverse the disease in many cases. Now here are your practical actions to start today. Action 1. Schedule a medical appointment. Ask for the tests: fasting glucose, oral glucose tolerance test, and HbA1c. Don't wait for symptoms to appear. Action 2. Measure your waist circumference today. Write it down. Men above 102 cm and women above 88 cm are in the risk zone. This is your baseline. Action 3. Clean out your kitchen. Eliminate or drastically reduce ultra-processed foods. If it comes in a colorful package with unpronounceable ingredients, it's not real food. Action 4. Start moving. It doesn't have to be perfect. Start with 10 minutes of walking today. Do it again tomorrow. Then increase to 15 minutes. Build the habit. Action 5. Prioritize your sleep. Set a fixed bedtime. Turn off screens 1 hour before. Create a dark, cool environment. Treat sleep as a health priority. Action 6. Walk after meals. Just 10-15 minutes after lunch and dinner. This single change can dramatically reduce your glycemic spikes. Action 7. Find support. Share your goals with someone close. Join support groups. You don't have to do this alone. And here is the most important truth I want to leave with you. Every choice counts. Every healthy meal you eat, every walk you take, every good night's sleep, every moment you manage your stress. All of this is literally reprogramming your metabolism, protecting your organs, adding years of quality to your life. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be consistent. Progress, not perfection. Small sustainable changes beat big empty promises every time. Type 2 diabetes may be a silent disease, but your response to it doesn't have to be. You now have the knowledge, you have the tools, you have the power to change your health trajectory now. Don't wait for the scare of a diagnosis. Don't wait for the first complication. Don't wait to feel like you've lost control of your health. Start today. Start now. Your body, your organs, your family, and your future thank you for every step you take in this direction. Before you go, I need to ask you a few things. If this video was helpful to you, if you learned something new, if it changed your perspective on diabetes, please leave a like. It helps YouTube show this content to more people who need this vital information. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos on preventive health, nutrition, exercise, and well-being. We have a lot more valuable content coming. Share this video with someone who needs to see it. It could be a family member with diabetes, a friend at risk, someone you love and want to see healthy. Sharing knowledge can literally save lives. And leave a comment telling me, what was the most impactful piece of information in this video for you? What are you going to start doing differently from today? I want to know your story. Let's create a support community here in the comments. Remember, type 2 diabetes may be silent, but you don't have to be. Be the voice of your own health. Be the protagonist of your transformation story. Until the next video, take care. Your health is your most precious asset.